All right, welcome to the live at 1, or fun at 1 as we said in the last post. We're
Fun at 1!
Exactly. We'll be waiting for some people to come in as we start. We're going to get set up. We've got some boba straws, I guess some plastic ones as well as our metal ones we talked about. And I'm going to look at the chat real quick.
So if you're just joining us, we're going to show you something with the straws for fun, right? Because it was something that I was pointing out. We go and enjoy these milkshakes a lot of times after we train as a fun snack. And then I'm always all about anytime you can use an everyday item for self-defense, then that's already something that you have on you that isn't necessarily something that makes you think of a weapon. But really anything in life that you have on you can be utilized for self-defense. And so basically I had pointed out before that the straws could be viable because the way that they're designed with this little kind of angled cut means that the end is a little bit sharp, which there's not much strength to it, but just the scratch reaction, right, would cause a change in the interaction between you and someone. So particularly for women and children, if you're enjoying your shake and then all of a sudden something unwelcome happens, then you have an improvised weapon that you could utilize that really could be something that would be innocent to the world, but it can be helpful, even just as a potential fist pack, right, to strengthen your hand. Anyone who's done any boxing or kickboxing knows that gloves often have a little bar that you can grab. And so the idea is it makes you less vulnerable to what is called a boxer's fracture in the medical world. And even Mike Tyson, in a serious fight that he was in Las Vegas, broke his hand. And so it's a very common injury. Anyone in the medical field, doctors, nurses in the ER, or paramedics and EMTs are very familiar with this injury. Even professionals, a good buddy of mine that is an MMA coach, he also had a situation where he had to defend himself and he actually broke both of his hands because without any protection, if you don't train with striking barehanded, it's easy to injure your hand. And so to counter that, I do train to fight empty-handed by always not using gloves on my own heavy bag and my own sandbags and my own wall hits and all that kind of stuff. But in this day of being aware with COVID-19, that gets tricky, right? To have skin-to-skin contact and all of that. So a lot of people don't do that type of training. But anything in your hand, whether it's a boba straw or whether it's a pen, anything in your hand can actually help the small muscles in your hands align in such a way to protect your fists upon striking. So something as simple as this, even if I was just to fold this in half as a fist pack so that only that little sharp bit was sticking out, it then has a function like an improvised karambit, where you have something sharp that can create an effect. And really the goal wouldn't be to seriously harm someone that way, but you're gonna get a reaction if you have something like this. So basically what happened is we were getting our shake after training after the Instagram live show that we did for you yesterday. And while we were in line, I noticed that the shop had these stainless steel ones. So because of that, I thought, hey, that could be a pretty good improvised self-defense tool in the right hands and with the right training. So we came up with the idea and we said, hey, you know what? Fun at 1 because we had to change the time because the gyms reopened and that changed our schedule a little bit. I thought, hey, this would be a great way to launch the new time slot, is show something fun with an improvised tool for self-defense. So Nate's gonna check in with you on some questions and I'll be right back because I don't want to scratch him. So I do have something I can use instead of this that is not as injurious as this to demonstrate some ideas. So see you for Nate.
Okay. Yeah, so there is some stretches you're asking just now, right? So for side kicks, stretches you can do for side kicks definitely we'd have to get a little more space here to get ready for that. Bring this down a little bit. But similar enough, you could go like we talked about before. Make legs out like this, and you're gonna slowly inch downward as you're going down, keeping the muscles engaged as well as stretching the muscles on the inside of the leg. You put your hands down and just kind of slowly get into that stretch. And if you move forward and backward a little bit, you get more of that area in between the thigh that will increase your flexibility, because it's all these bands of muscles going around the leg that it's going to be, sometimes you're stretching one versus the other. So you're going to have to kind of move it around and slowly inch down as you get lower. The classical one, you can also sit and just stretch this way, holding the knees down as far as you can, pointing the toes directly up. And at first, just holding the stretch, keeping the back straight. And bring your hands out and walk them out in front of you. Again, keep the back straight. Then you go off to your right side. You can hold your toe, the right hand. And either going over with the left hand, reaching as far as you can, tucking your right arm under. And even facing the other way completely, grabbing across and twisting your spine to grab your shin at your foot. And you do the same thing on the other side, left hand to the left foot, keeping the knee down. And then tuck the left arm under, try to get your right hand over to your foot, your left foot. And then turning and twisting all the way, grab your foot, same right hand. And back to center split. You can inch forward a little bit more again. You're just gonna push your butt forward and keeping your heels down so you actually get a little bit wider stretch. Hold that for a little bit. Then you would just repeat the same process again, going forward, leaning forward. And then doing the right side and the left side. And you would pop back up and try to engage those muscles again. Pushing toward into your feet and pushing into the ground. So not just relaxing here, but actually pushing into the ground. To get some functional flexibility. And you try to inch your way back up your feet. Slowly releasing that stretch. Shaking it out. And that's one way you can improve your flexibility of the side kick or any other kick that's really laterally moving.
Okay, so a little bit of history. This isn't by itself the newest idea on the planet. So old school, right? There was something called a UR stick. This is something that's just a term. You've also probably heard the term Kubutan, which is off of that. Also in Filipino martial arts, right? When you think of FMA, Kali Arnis Eskrima, most people think of a long stick, but really it's a full spectrum martial art that includes empty hand all the way up to edged weapons. And on a basic level, a little stick like this can be used in this way. And people think of the ends of this ability to strike vulnerable areas with this, but as I mentioned, it's also valuable as a fist pack. So a long time ago, had to do this. I was a lifeguard, ocean lifeguard at the beach, and there was an incident. And in the midst of trying to help break up the incident, then the people turn on you and try to hurt you. I used a piece of driftwood that I literally just reached for in the sand, and that became the fist pack to not injure my hands, to get a reaction, to then put the person in a hold to try to calm them down. So wasn't really striking to knock anybody out. I just wanted to try to control them to not have the fight escalate. That was really not anything to do with me. I was breaking up a fight. So something simple like this, right? Kind of difficult to do with a plastic straw. The other problem with a plastic straw, because we're both part Hawaiian, is the environmental impact. You don't really want a plastic straw, particularly not at the beach, where sea turtles or other ocean creatures could be harmed by that plastic going into the ocean. So any of you who have dealt with the new policy of a lot of restaurants to issue paper straws knows from experience that paper straws aren't that great, right? The expression is paper straws suck because that's what you do through a straw, but really they also don't work very well, particularly with smoothies or milkshakes, because they get soggy and then they stop working, which makes them no good, and then it just becomes a waste of paper, really. And then the plastic's no good. So then that's where you get into the value behind a stainless steel straw. Now, the particular reason why I reacted to the one we saw at the boba shop was that the diameter was more valuable for self-defense than a normal diameter metal straw. I do have a metal straw that was designed for a coffee cup, the type that you would get at a mainstream coffee shop. And those, yeah, they're a good alternative to a plastic straw or a paper straw, but not as valuable for the self-defense component. Whereas something that has a larger diameter, which is made because it's something that comes from Asia, but now it's really popular in Hawaii, is the boba drinks, whether it's coffee or tea or a milkshake, where there's little cylindrical mochi boba balls in the bottom that are kind of make a fun, tasty addition to the drink. And you need a wider diameter straw in order to enjoy that aspect. So that's where I came up with this. But I wanted you to see that there's a long-standing story there. Indigenous people from the beginning of time figured out that this was a valuable idea. So whether it was driftwood or something crafted, this one was made for me by a friend of mine when I was living in the Philippines. And because it was a gift from a friend, I've had a sentimental attachment to this particular one. In more modern times, you have the tactical pen, which can be used the same way. But a lot of tactical pens these days, they look very tactical. So it's kind of difficult to argue that something that looks like this is innocent. So maybe not appropriate for everyone to carry around all the time. Although they are quite useful, but depending on how they look, you may or may not have a problem going through TSA or traveling internationally on airports. So not always the best solution, right? My father has a sense of humor, and so 50 caliber shell, right? This one's a nerd, it doesn't have the gunpowder in it anymore, but it can be used that way, and this is something that he can have on his desk as just like a fun little conversation piece, but then in a pinch, you could use this in the same way as a fist pack as well as a striking tool using the end. Then FMA, Kalernis Eskrima Salat, the karambit, right? This one's a trainer, so it's safe for me to demonstrate on Nate with, but this is a very evolved self-defense tool that some of you may be familiar with if you study FMA. So the thing is, again, even in its trainer effect, it's pretty difficult to have this on you all the time without it being perceived that you were looking for a fight or that you weren't coming from a place of aloha. It looks like you kind of wanted trouble. As where if you have something like the straw, well, why did you have this on you, Mr. Young?
I need to get my boba drink every day, so I always have one of these on me so that I have to ask for a paper or a plastic straw. Then I'm better for the environment. So what's wrong with this metal straw? Is there a problem?
No problem, right? Oli pilikia. No problem at all. So this is what we wanted to share with you today, but we're sharing this with you as a fun and very innocent tool, which now that we've done this video, how likely is that we could see this kind of straw used in the next John Wick film instead of a pencil? It could happen because in the scene where John Wick uses a pencil to dispatch a guy who's trying to kill him, you could use this in the same way. It could easily enter an eye socket without too much impediment. So that's where this is the deal from that. Also, in terms of self-defense, you have the Kubotan. Sensei Takuboda of karate, who quite an interesting character, by the way. Long ago, I was competing in a karate tournament, and I got to hang out with him. For whatever reason, he liked me and ended up wanting to have dinner and hang out. And he gave me one of these, and so then he took me through a whole course to learn his technique for the Kubotan, which really was based on the old school Uwara stick, but it was made out of hard ABS plastic, kind of similar to the polymer used in firearms like the newer Glock and Sig Sauer pistols. And it was like that. There were versions with a keychain on it, and then this one happens to have like a little piece of paracord so that you can open your hand and do stuff without losing it. So that's something that I decided to do, which I innovated. Pretty easy to do. You just get a drill through a regular Kubotan and then paracord, make a knot on the other end, and you're good to go with this. But
it's kind of like how you see phones nowadays have that thing that they can like look at their phone their whole time. But now it's a weapon version of that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so that's where the concept comes from. So I want to help you see that there's always a bit of a trinity to looking at any type of genuine martial art or combat science, in the sense that guaranteed most ideas at some point in humanity's history, since human beings have been in conflict since Cain and Abel, there was somebody before you that thought of this idea. So it always benefits you to look back into the roots, go back to the roots with that. And that's why the trinity that I always share with my students in class is to have respect for the past, application for the present, and preparation for the future. And one of my teachers, Senior Grandmaster Rick Alamany, who Kempo and Jiu-Jitsu and modern Arnis, he taught us as kids the very old salutation that he learned. And so what we've done with that in our classes is that I formalize that I want to come to you in peace, right? Look for and see the good in others, and train in mutual respect. And then the backstory behind that one also has to do with having respect for the past. As my Hawaiian Lua teacher, Alohe Dennis Eli, says, if you don't know your roots, you won't know where you're going. So having respect for the history that you come from is important. Giving credit where credit is due to those teachers and ancestors that helped you get to the point you're at. Then application for the present, in the here and now, what can we do, right? And then preparation for the future, meaning how is that going to help not only the future that you will see, but also the future that your grandchildren will see. In Hawaiian culture, the wisdom is exemplified by something that some of you may have heard of called the pond, the fishing pond. So basically what would happen is, you heard the old saying, right? You're all familiar with the old saying. If you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. If you teach someone how to fish, they eat for a lifetime. But the Hawaiians, our ancestors, piled up rocks so that there's little holes between the rocks in a secluded bay. And the small fish would swim in through the holes to escape the predators. And then in the fish pond, they'd grow larger. And now they can't get back out. So now you have basically like a earthly aquarium, if you will, an endless supply for the future of fish to feed your family. So the concept is not only you teaching someone how to eat for a day or eat for their lifetime, but our ancestors had it in mind to have that malama have that care because they felt it was their kuleana or responsibility to help the great-great-grandchildren that they would never even meet to be able to keep their ohana, keep their family sustained over time. So something like this, the idea that we're sharing with you today, to be fair to our ancestors, I don't think that this is anywhere close to a new idea, but being creative individuals and lifelong martial artists, I do feel that it's something that you should always look for the current day application and the potential future benefit to anything that you might come across. And so it was a serendipity moment yesterday when I thought of this idea with the straws.
Right.
And
if you guys remember a super chat, you could help us support the fact that we had to buy these not very cheap straws. I was surprised that
True.
they're like almost $10 each.
we bought 4 of them.
I bought 4 of them.
4 of them because we felt like if we only had one, we couldn't really teach you what we want to share. So really, we bought these straws yesterday
Yeah.
after our live presentation on Instagram, only to be able to share this idea with you today. So please do feel free to super chat. It does make a difference because we did this just for you. And this is free, of course. But anyone who would like to contribute to the cause, it's deeply appreciated. And it helps us to make more content for you because any little bit helps. So even if it's a small amount, if many people do that, we can hopefully break even on
Right.
these straws.
It's like it would be basically supporting us and sponsoring these videos for you and everyone else who gets to enjoy them. So yeah, super chat is just something you can do to donate. You just, if you know what that is, there's a little dollar thingy there, and you can click on it where the chat is, and then it'll ask you how much you want to put. Anything is fine. The straws were around $10 if someone did ask a second ago.
Yeah, please.
So
Please sponsor our straws. Plus, here's the other funny part that you might not have thought of. If we use these straws to train with, they might not be that hygienic to drink out of, and they might not look very nice.
But the kit did come with a cleaning.
Yes,
Man.
I actually have it on me.
Yeah.
It came with a cleaning brush. See these? And here's a little reveal for you. If you carry your cleaning tool with your straw, it also can be used as a weapon of distraction. So, for example, Nate comes in and he puts me in some kind of a chokehold or something, right? And I tickle his ear. You can get a reaction. Anyway, so, but what these are designed for is to actually clean your straws. So you would run warm water and maybe dip it in some simple green or a little bit of bleach, and then you could run it through and clean your straw. You know, kind of like if those of you who own firearms know that you have to take care of your firearms. So it's similar to that type of cleaning brush that you would use to take care of firearms. And so right away I thought of that it could also be used for tickling. So, you know, for those of you couples that train together in martial arts, when I was a kid, I heard the thing that everyone's heard, right? The couple that kicks together, sticks together, that was a saying in traditional classes. So over time, because we train the full range from ground fighting to firearms, I felt like, hey, I got to add to that, right? So for the strikers, the kicking one makes sense, but then for grapplers, I say the family that kicks together, sticks together, the family that rolls together, holds together, and the family that trains together, remains together. So for couples, you know, you could have all kinds of like fun training experiments with this aspect that maybe we don't want to do in the regular class, but would be kind of fun. Like using this as a tickling distraction, just a thought. But that's what this is about, and these come with the straws. So if you want to get one of these straws, you also get the distractionary tickle tools. So back to this. If you're going to start from zero, you have to start with your base training. And I'm bringing that up because I feel it's super critical not to depend on a weapon or a tool or an implement. you really have to be able to feel that sense of inner calm and confidence with nothing at all, meaning your ability to defend yourself without any implements. And then really, I actually prefer the idea of then moving from nothing to understanding the utility of an improvised tool versus a formal weapon. Because otherwise, what happens to some people, that some of our mutual friends actually, is that they become very, very dependent on the weapon. It becomes like Linus's security blanket in Charlie Brown, where if they don't have it on them, they feel naked, if you will. So even some friends of mine in firearms, if they don't have their concealed carry firearm on them, they feel vulnerable and naked and defenseless. So living in Hawaii, where we're very grateful actually that that's not as much needed here, you don't really want to be in a situation where you're forced to escalate the level of violence. So that becomes important, because if you feel threatened, you're going to go to your lowest common denominator. And that's why I feel your lowest common denominator that you should learn first should be the least violent one. And that way you can always scale up, but it's hard to go backwards if you've already upped the ante. In other words, if I shoved him, right, and then he pulls out a 45 and shoots me, that's not really legally defensible. And more than that, it's not morally defensible. And this is really important, because we're doing this on YouTube, and I really don't want to create monsters and have it be where someone uses something that we shared with you openly and for free to hurt someone unnecessarily. You really only want to implement your self-defense skills when you really don't have a choice. I don't want anyone hurting anyone. Part of the path, at least for us as lifelong martial artists, is to get to a point where your life is so peaceful that you never have to actually use these skills on another human being. So first start with nothing. So what's your training base now? What did you start with? What martial art do you come from? So granted, we're wearing the core symbol from Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do, but that's partly because that's very inclusive and very supportive of the audience here that supports Nate's channel, that's what you come here for. But from our perspective, it's valuable in part because of the philosophy that allows you the freedom to draw in anything as long as it's in keeping with your core principles that'll amplify your development as an individual, as a martial artist, as a human being, and therefore it's appropriate. But a lot of these skills are very ancient skills, just as the philosophy where many of Bruce Lee's famous quotes, people will look back and say, oh, Lao Tzu said that, or so-and-so said that. But what you don't realize is that Bruce Lee was a voracious reader and a very in-depth researcher. So what would happen is he would actually study core ideas from the ancient Greeks and the ancient Chinese and everywhere else he could get them, and then he would extrapolate a very simple, communicatable philosophy from all of that. So you'll see something where what he's referring to will be like paragraphs or pages long in other sources, and he'll sum it up like bam in one sentence. And that, in a way, is a form of extreme efficiency as a martial artist, to make something as simple as possible. And if you go back in time, simplicity has a power to it, because under stress, anything too complicated, you're not going to be able to do it. So you want your core base to come from you naturally and not be crazy complicated or something that's going to require a perfected scenario to be able to execute. So your base has to be super simple. So if we're going to come from that, what are we starting with? So what you're going to be starting with, if you're going to lead to the use of a tool, is going to be without the tool. And that means you're going to understand on your own body how you're going to create social distancing is the whole thing we deal with now. That's actually not so far away from tactical distancing, where without even knowing about the virus, you already should be wary of anyone you don't know coming within a certain distance of you. On a tactical level, as I've shared in other videos, that's actually going to be more than 6 feet usually, because in one step, someone could be inside that threat bubble. They could be inside the danger zone for you. So start with that. You want to start with the idea that you're going to be aware of your surroundings and maintain that kind of thing so that you won't actually have to do something like we're going to show you today. So
Yeah, and on that note too, so thank you for the super chat. We did get something donated. Yeah, thank you. And because of that, we should answer your question now, actually.
Yes.
So your question was about, is it true that if you're in a real fight, your adrenaline goes so high, you won't even be able to do the certain skills you learned? And that is partly true, yes. But part of it also comes from the training and also learning how to calm your mind in those moments to control your own body. So yes, it's hard to fight against that adrenaline rush to like do whatever and go apeshit, but with proper
excuse
training,
the language, anybody.
right, proper, excuse that, but yes, definitely the mentality can be trained, and it happens usually through stress testing. So like getting actually hit, you know, that's gonna feel different. So once you're actually exposed to different like stresses, either being hit or being pummeled a bunch of times or being rushed to be tackled, you know, all these different things, you get used to it and the body understands it now. Then you won't get that shock factor and your adrenaline's gonna shoot up to the roof, as you said in the comment. So anything else? You agree with that?
Yeah, I can go a lot further on that.
Right, yeah,
You might even remember because I taught you this in the beginning.
Uh-huh.
So in the very beginning, when I met this kid in high school, not a kid now, but when I met him, he was a kid. He was very much into trying to push his limits on the more technical and fancy aspects of martial arts training. So in that sense, a lot of what he was doing would be very difficult to do in real life under combat stress. So I'm going to quote one of my coaches, one of my teachers, Coach Tony Blauer, the founder of the PDR Spear system, in that you have to come from how you were created. You have to come from your nature. So no matter who you are, you're going to have some sort of a flinch response to danger. And giving credit where credit is due, Coach Blauer, when he gives his courses, which I highly recommend, he'll show you a batter at bat in front of a pitcher and talk about what happens if you get hit with the pitch. And what happens is, because of the cross-extensor reflex, the batter can't let go of the bat to protect his face. He'll just do this. Because if you're already holding an object, you'll clench the object. And this is just how we were designed as human beings. Also, in response to danger, you'll have a physiological response that is already there and you just don't know what it is until you're pressure tested. And that's why pressure testing is so important. In any martial art you do, you have to do something where you're having to fight against an uncooperative, resistant opponent, right? Judo was already a big change off of traditional jiu-jitsu way back in 1882 with Professor Jigoro Kano, because you have all these cool moves, but what happens if the other guy doesn't want to let you do any of them? And so the whole concept of that with Randori, with the free practice, was can you pull off the throw if the other guy doesn't want to let you throw him, and if he wants to also throw you? And it's very prevalent in certain systems, old school, certainly in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you have a resistant opponent, so you have to make it work based on what you're actually in, the situation you're in. And in the very beginning, if you've never done grappling before, you can feel very claustrophobic and very helpless, and you can panic, right? So what is your initial reaction? Your initial reaction to danger? If you know nothing, and if you have not been trained, you can identify one of certain things that will always happen to human beings. So one is to go fetal position. There's some type of an attack coming at you, and you cover up because you don't want to get hit. You want to protect your brain, your throat, your vital organs. So you cover up like a baby in a fetal position. Another one is to push away danger. And that is, I sense some kind of threat, and so my hands go out toward you because I want to push away the danger. Now, both of those in a way are good because they're proactive. What most people don't really talk about that is very true in real life is that a lot of people will kind of freeze. So their brain will be over processing. I didn't do anything to this person. Why are they trying to hurt me? And they're trying to think about this, and they'll be like, arr. And that gets tricky even nowadays in particular because we live in an environment where the approach is not to physically train in self-defense, but to say, you know, I don't like bullying, or that as a statement, and yet the bully doesn't care. Especially with asocial violence. Asocial violence is they don't even know you, they don't even care about you, but unbeknownst to you, that day they lost their job, their girlfriend broke up with them, and everything's going wrong, and the next person they see, they're going to get aggressive toward because they have all this pent-up anger in them. So it's not about you. You need to be able to identify that and not overanalyze it, because that thinking process will then cut you off from your ability to act under stress. So what happens to your body is not just the adrenaline dump, but it's also heart rate affected. So gross motor skills are what happen when your heart rate spikes, and so you lose your ability to do complicated things. So a fine motor skill, we'll start with this. A fine motor skill would be in music. You play piano, you play guitar, or you're on a keyboard like Nate is right now, checking your questions. Anyway, you're on a keyboard or something like this, and it has to be accurate. So that high level of eye-hand coordination and accuracy, whether you're playing the piano or playing guitar or an ukulele or typing, that type of thing gets very difficult when your heart rate starts to rise. So if your resting heart rate was 60 or whatever, when it starts to get a little over 100, that's gone. You're gonna lose that ability to execute fine motor skills under stress. So a martial art that's super complicated, that says, I'm gonna somehow magically hit a pressure point while I grab your thumbnail and then create this, and then grab your third eyelash from the left, anything that's too complicated, you're not gonna be able to do it. Then you have complex motor skills. And most martial arts are complex motor skills, and that's where your hands have to do two different things. But again, if your heart rate spikes too high, it becomes difficult to do that. Then you have gross motor skills. So for the average person, when their heart rate goes 135, boom, their ability to do complex and fine motor skills dissipates, and now they're left with primal behavior, right? A bear hug, a big John Wayne shot, right? A throw to the fences uppercut, a tackle, right? A shove, a grab. These are muscular movements that involve the big power muscles of the body. So when we're talking about weapons usage, that actually becomes kind of difficult, unless you're just talking about getting hit with a stick. It becomes kind of difficult to execute those kinds of skills under stress. So a big aspect of the initial training for combatives, for defensive tactics, for professionals, is to have your first movement already be the one that you could only do if your heart rate was really high, and then to be able to functionalize yourself to get toward your ability to execute complex motor skills under stress. And that is part of why professionals in military, law enforcement, firefighters, paramedics, EMTs, that's why you have to be able to execute your skills under stress in training, because in real life the stress level will be higher, right? Someone's actually trying to kill you or hurt you, or you're trying to save someone's life, and time is critical. Your skills have to be there in a way that you don't have to stop and process. So the actual physical skill has to be trained to the level where you're not thinking anymore. This has to do with 4 levels of skill mastery. So first you have unconscious competence, unconscious incompetence. The first one is unconscious incompetence. You don't really know what it is or how to do it, right? So I'll give you an example. My knowledge of a particular thing might be very distant. I've maybe heard of it, but I don't know how to do it. So even though my mom is great at macrame and crochet or whatever, I know what it is, but if you handed me a bunch of yarn and stuff, I don't know if you'd like what I could make out of that. I don't think it would be a great sweater or a great blanket for you. I think you'd be like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, because I don't. So unconscious incompetence is the first one. Then unconscious, conscious competence, right? So the idea is you don't know what it is and you don't know how to do it. And then you know what it is, but you still don't know how to do it. So that is this whole little chain where, let's say your grandparents get a new sound system and Blu-ray player and ability to use the internet on their smart TV, but because of the generation they came from, they aren't really sure how to do that. So they're going through the instructions, trying to figure out how to set that up, but it's difficult for them. They can't really figure it out. So they're conscious of it, but they're still incompetent in ability to do it. Okay? Then there's conscious competence. Conscious competence is, if you think about it, you can do it. So if you own a vehicle and if you learn how to do it, you can change a tire, do an oil change, replace a battery, basic kind of stuff that you wouldn't have to be a mechanic to do. And every person who owns a vehicle should hopefully be able to do those three things, because that's regular maintenance for your vehicle, as well as keeping it clean and protected from the sun and all that kind of stuff. So that's conscious competence. If you think about it, you can do it, right? Then what your real goal is as a martial artist is unconscious competence, meaning that without thinking, you can do it. So unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, right? Conscious competence, and then unconscious competence. So meaning the goal on the fourth level of this box is to be able to, without thinking, do things. And that is why in the beginning of your school, in the beginning of your cultivation of your skills, you want to do a less is more, where you're not training a huge quantity of material, but what material you do train, you become very, very good at, to the point that without thinking about it, you can do it. The analogy that I like for that is reading. When you're a little kid, it's difficult. You have to sound out the words and figure it out. But once you truly know how to read, then you forget how to read and you just read. And that is how you're able to, without thinking, even with other things going on, right? You could be reading while your children are playing, or while something else is going on, and you're still aware of the other things, but you're able to still read. For children, riding a bike. When you're first doing it, I remember my grandfather, and I had an old school Schwinn Stingray with training wheels, and my grandfather's trying to explain centrifugal force to me, and I'm trying to balance the bike, right? That was spooky at that point in time. But then, once you actually know how to ride a bike, my brother and I did the whole go on trails and everything with mountain bikes and do little jumps, and then after that I ended up learning how to ride a motorcycle, and riding a motorcycle as a form of primary transportation, which, if you don't know how to do that, it can seem scary, but if you genuinely get that skill, crawl, walk, run, then you get to a point where, without thinking, you can see all the other vehicles and the potential road hazards, because you are quite vulnerable on a motorcycle. Which is one of the two reasons why I'm wearing my motorcycle vest. One was because I wanted to hit that analogy for you, and the other reason is it has pockets so I can bust out the straws for you, see? But I'm trying to help that person that was kind enough to help sponsor us with the straws in giving you these three tools. So one is explaining the effect that stress has on the body, that your natural response without training is going to be possibly to freeze or to go fetal or to push away danger. And then you have to work from that natural flinch response to get to what you really want to do, right? So Coach Flower will say, you know, your first initial movement, if it comes from this, it has that structural integrity and functionality on how you are made as a human being. And then you can use that to get to your martial art, if you will. But the beginning has to be functionalizing. It has to be empowering to allow you to be able to do your skill set. But without having the beginning strong, you never get to that skill set, right? It's like you have the greatest car, motorcycle, or truck in the world, but if you don't have the keys, you can't start the engine. You can just look at the car. In order to functionalize the vehicle and actually get on the road, you need to be able to functionalize it. And then you have to have the skill to operate the vehicle, and then you have to have the skill to operate the vehicle under stress. Could be bad weather, could be other vehicles. And really, riding a motorcycle makes you a better driver because you're so fragile knowing that anyone that bumps you or anything in the road could kill you. So then when you're driving a regular vehicle, a truck or a car, you have this higher peripheral sense of awareness of all the other factors that can affect your ability to safely get from point A to point B. And that becomes super critical. So that's the first thing, is come from how you're made as a human being, where your first technique is extremely simple, and then crawl, walk, run that skill to develop it to your goal that you really want to achieve. So that's one. And two is understanding how stress affects you, where the greater your heart rate is, the less coordinated you become, and that's like a measurable scientific fact. And that's why professional athletes have to train so much to be as good as they are at what they do, whether it's pro football or hitting three-pointers on the basketball court or any other professional sport, golf even, right? So any professional sport, you have to cultivate that where that skill set is there without you having to really think about it. So that would be thing two, is pressure testing your skill set. So first you're learning it in a very crawl, walk, run way, and then you're training it with progressive resistance and difficulty to be able to deal with that heart rate issue, which is why, by the way, it is a good idea to be fit. Because the more physically fit you are, the lower your resting heart rate is, and the more stress and exercise and hard work it takes to actually elevate your heart rate to the point of failure. So if you're in really good shape, you can stay functional longer. You can also get back to functional quicker. So in an extreme danger, for example, someone under high stress might initially spike with that adrenaline rush and the heart rate reacting to the incident. But then because of their training, they can now lower their heart rate and find their way back to their functional skill set. So that's going to be thing two, is to understand how all of that works with the science so that you don't take it personally. If you have a fail because your heart rate amped, then you need to get in better shape and you need to train with pressure testing to prevent that from happening. So that's the secondary thing. The third thing has to do with under the surface, because that's like a training method and then the physical reality. And then the third thing is mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So your intent has to be super clear. A lot of times people have actually an almost guilt about defending themselves. They don't have that self-worth that they want to hurt another human being, that they want to fight back. So a lot of times it's helpful to think of someone else. You might not know what to do if it's only you. But if you're protecting your spouse, or you're protecting a child, or protecting someone else you're responsible for caring for, then all of a sudden now you're going to be a lot more determined. And so you have to think of the people that love you in your life, for whom you make a difference. Fight for them if it's difficult for you to fight for yourself. Have a greater purpose. And having that greater purpose also helps you to become a more peaceful person, so that you're coming from courage and love and not coming from anger, fear, or insecurity. So this is something I brought up in another one of the videos that I did for Sifu Nate, but it's something that I think is super important. Your intent has to be from aloha. No good decision is made out of anger or fear. Good decisions are made out of courage and love. Be the aloha you want to see in the world around you. So the idea is, if you're coming from this very good, pure intention in your soul and in your emotions and in your mind's perspective of how you see others and the world around you, then physically that'll manifest. And that's why the internal training is so important. That's why I do daily train the breathing because the breathing affects your heart rate, right? That's the physical part. If I can control my breath, I can control my heart rate. And then that also has to do with then training your skills under elevated stress levels, so then you know you can perform with competence unconsciously. So there's that. Then under the surface, the meditation, if you have a spiritual background, prayer. Meditation and prayer go hand in hand the further back you go in history, whether it's monks in the Middle Ages or whether it's Shaolin monks at the Shaolin Temple. There's a connection there between the spirit, the heart, the mind, the body. There's that connection there that if you cultivate, it truly does make you much better as a human being, not just as a martial artist. And that's the real goal. If martial arts is your tool for this, which it certainly is for us, then you want to keep that moral element so that you become a paladin, you become a protector of good, a defender of the weak. You want to be someone that other people are grateful that you're there. My goal as a kid was always to be the guy that you'd want around if something bad happened. Not just bullies and stuff like this, but in my childhood imagination, I think, oh, if you were in a shipwreck, you'd want to be the guy that other people want in their lifeboat to help everyone. You'd want to be the guy in a plane crash that would help everyone survive, or, things like this. There was a TV show that was filmed here that I was on called Lost, and that was sort of the theme, right, as there's a plane crash on an island. But the larger aspect of that was, who are you to the other passengers? Are you someone that helps bring everyone together and work together toward a positive survival? Or are you someone that's part of the problem? And you definitely want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem, which morally is super important if we're showing you dangerous stuff on the internet, is please, please, please know that my intention and Nate's intention is for this to only be for good. That whole little thing I said was just mainly to thank the person that was willing to contribute the straws, because it goes a lot deeper than just an adrenaline dump. You have to understand the science of how you're made as a creature, as a human being, as an animal. Understand that, and then transcend that with your training in a crawl, walk, run basis, and then pressure test that training to be able to always come back to a functional perspective, which is not just the physicality of it, but also the morality of it. Meaning that in the midst of a fight, if I'm able to de-escalate the fight or make it less violent by either controlling the other person or getting away, that's far preferable than injuring someone on purpose, right? That intent. If your intent is pure, then you already are winning. Now, what do I mean by that? If you're holding your child and someone comes to harm your child, your intention is pure, it's because of love of the child. But if someone takes your parking space when you go to Costco, that's not a really good reason to go violent. They can have the parking space. It wasn't really yours. The parking spaces are there for any customer. Don't take it personally. So in life, we live in a time where, and this is not political, it's cultural. We live in a time when people get offended at like anything. Choose not to do that. Aloha is never offended. If you're coming from a pure point of view as how you see the world, under one sky, under the heavens, we are all one family, as Bruce Lee said. If you're coming from this inclusive connection of aloha, of ohana, of malama, of caring, and you see it as your kuleana, your responsibility to be part of the solution, to perpetuate that kindness and that compassion and that good in the world, then less bad things happen. And then your training is at its greatest success when you don't have to do anything physically at all, right? So that's all part of the answer to your question. Now, that one question, really, there's a lot to it. So see that. See the science, see the psychology, see the development of skill progression from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence to conscious competence to unconscious competence. See that, and then don't just talk the talk, walk the walk, by doing the progressive training that it will take for you to truly develop the ability not only to have these skills, but to be able to have them in a responsible and moral way. Because we also live in a very litigious society where people are quick to sue you over something, even if you weren't guilty of a crime. So the more kind and peaceful and good you can be to other people, the better. It does take higher skill to do that. So what do I mean by that? It takes a certain amount of skill to fend off an opponent through injuring them, right? And if you're coming from a point of fear, then that's a natural progression to want to be too violent or be. Every movie, right? Every movie is based on this hero revenge thing, right? Something bad happens, and then they go on this vendetta. And in a movie, it seems great, but what does that do to you as a human being, right? The old saying, if you seek revenge, dig two graves, that's true. Not just true in a physical sense, but you're going to lose the best part of yourself. You're going to lose that part of you that used to hug your grandparents or whatever it is that made you feel loved. You're going to lose that if you're consumed by darkness. So strive toward developing your inner self is actually the more important thing under the surface than developing the outer self and being perceived as, oh, he's a really tough martial artist, he's a bad dude, all this kind of thing. Being that is no good unless it's for the right reasons. So hope that helps answer your question. It's the adrenaline dump happens, but with the proper approach, it happens in a way that you can deal with successfully.
Yeah, great. That's a good explanation. That was a nice long one. I hope that's sufficient for you. I'm pretty sure that you got a lot of good information there now. And thank you, Zen, for that super chat, Tony Edge.
Thank you. Mahalo nui loa.
And that actually triggered a bunch of other questions, a string of them, and I'm kind of happy about it. I said that in the chat already, that, yeah, I'm glad you guys are getting involved in the questions now, and it's really starting to stir up curiosity, and that's always a good thing. Curiosity is always great, so you can explore and expand your mind with more questions and more answers, hopefully, that we can give to you. I know maybe we won't get to all of them today, because there was a lot there. I tried to answer a few short ones. One of the interesting ones I thought, as I'm recapping, is that since we're talking about realistic fighting and what's happening on the street, and even someone, the last comment was about, I see a lot of JKD people getting beat by boxers. I'm like, okay, well, maybe because those are certain kinds of videos that are definitely, they're built upon those kinds of style versus style, but they're not really style versus style, it's person versus person, really, in the true aspect of that. But anyway, there's some that was talking about different environments like gravel or sand or concrete, and I did tell you guys that we actually think about that in mind, even though yes, we do train on mats, and part of that I said in the chat was because we're teaching out of gyms and we have the liabilities and they don't want us to take them outside the gym because that goes outside of their coverage and our coverage sometimes, and plus we don't want anyone to get hurt. Now, that's good training to think that. So if you want a person to do that, or if you have a one-on-one session with one of your coaches or us or whoever, and you both agree you want to train outside, then maybe that's fine. But in most cases, we don't want anyone to get injured because you are putting yourself at higher risk in those environments. But it's good to know those environments, so it's very true. It's more realistic.
It's also something that you can properly prepare for to make it safer. So in the same way that instead of using the actual stainless steel straw, I could use the Kuputan or something else so that I wouldn't mark him up.
Right. Right.
Exactly. You can do the same thing with your training. For example, fist gear, which are the suits that Coach Blauer makes, allow you to do simulation of fights with realistic contact without serious injury. Exactly. So I've invested in 15 of these suits that I use for these guys because it's really not enough to look cool, and really that's just superficial. If you're truly training to be a martial artist, the way of the warrior means it has to actually work. And to me, that's not about style. Style to me is an invitation. So in other words, a lot of us admire and appreciate Bruce Lee, his philosophy, his energy in his films, all of that. And if that's an invitation that draws you into your own personal growth and progression, that's a great thing. It can also be something cultural. I have friends that because they grew up in a family with Japanese heritage, they specifically studied karate or judo. I have friends that because they were Chinese, they specifically did kung fu. I have friends that because they were Filipino, they specifically did Kali Arnis Eskrima. I have friends from every different ethnicity and culture that initially were exposed to the invitation of style through their cultural background or their ethnic background. Now, it's partly because both of us are actually mixed ethnically and culturally that it's quite comfortable for me, and I think also for you,
yeah,
to not feel bound by that. I mean, I can't identify by one group. Which of my grandparents do I appreciate? Which of my ancestors am I descended from? Well, if I'm going to look at the totality of that, there would be all of them, and then each one of those is a ethnic and cultural journey to study and discover. I actually don't believe in the concept of race. Why? Because there's only one race, the human race. I'm going to say Bruce Lee's quote again, since this is a JKD inspired audience. Under the sky, under the heavens, there is but one family. There's only one race, the human race. And from the view of our creator, from Keakua, it's a kaleidoscope of colors, because what is mattering truly to our creator is inside. You can't see it. It's not about that. Depending on how much sun I get, I can be very, very dark or very, very light because I have those DNA streams on either ends of the spectrum within me. It's not about what you look like, it's about who you are. That's the thing. And really, even the concept of racism, if you're looking at it historically, comes from an old view where they actually thought that we weren't all the same species, that if they were following the theory of evolution, that one of us came from a Neanderthal and another group came from a Cro-Magnon man, and so we weren't all Homo sapiens. But we are all Homo sapiens. We're all the same thing, so we're all one race, really. That's what I feel is true. And the longer you train, the more that's also true of style. Meaning, if you have an open mind and an open heart and a curious nature, there is something that is valuable from every single cultural martial art on the planet that you can glean from. And that is actually part of what happened, not only after Bruce Lee passed away, but during his lifetime, where many of his students and friends exposed him to martial arts from other cultures. Guru Danny DeSanto and my teacher, Sifu Richard Bastillo, went in depth into the Filipino martial arts, in part because they had that ethnic and cultural background, but also because the arts themselves were amazing and so rich and had so much to offer that was in alignment with the physical skills that Bruce Lee had shared with them from Wing Chun, Jun Fan, Tao Chinese Kung Fu, Jeet Kune Do. It was all like this. And if you really see the long path of your whole life, then you can constantly be learning something new, as well as revisiting what you learned originally and continually sharpening the sword, if you will. So that lifelong journey, the invitation is through a style. When I was little, I did a Hawaiian form of jiu-jitsu called Kodokan Danzaru Jiu-Jitsu, which was a mixed martial art developed by Professor Henry Seishiro Okazaki, but it was already multi-ethnic, multicultural. It had Hawaiian Lua, it had Japanese Jiu-Jitsu and Judo, it had Chinese Kung Fu, Filipino Eskrima, it had boxing and catch wrestling and fencing and savate. It had all these different influences. Whatever Professor Okazaki could grab that would enhance his art, he cultivated and then developed his own complete syllabus to share not just the fighting aspect, martial art developed here in Hawaii also, but at a little bit later time frame. So Okazaki's art was in the 1920s, and then Seijo Adriano Emperado and his friends created Kaiju Kembo right after World War II. 1947 was the start of that, and very down and dirty, aggressive, proactive system. Now, as a child, these were like serious yin and yang, or ku and hina, we would say in Hawaiian. In the jiu-jitsu, we wore white uniforms, and it was very peaceful, and we actually had a hug at the end of class, right? And in the Kajukenbo Kempo, it was tough. We'd line up, and my teacher would come down the line and punch us in the stomach to toughen up our abs, to convince us we could take a punch. And I remember I was a little kid, right? And he'd go, boom, and I go, boom. And then he would say, anyone hit me that hard at school, Kai? I'd be like, no, Sifu. He'd say, then you got nothing to be afraid of. And the idea was it was progressive training. And don't think he was abusive, because he wasn't. He wasn't hitting us hard enough to injure us. It was a crawl, walk, run. It was like a little tap and then up, up, up. But the idea was to toughen you. But the two styles were taught in a very different way. And yet I felt a deep love and affection for both of them that I grew up in. And then as a teenager, I met Guru Danny Santo, who introduced me to Sifu Richard Bastillo, and I met them through Professor Wally J. So all of that was combined, and then Jeet Kune Do was like another platform to continue that journey I was already on of this multi-ethnic, multicultural, hybrid, mixed martial arts concept. Also, that's true in Hapkido and in several other systems. The concept that you're going to draw from different things to develop yourself toward a particular goal. So style is an invitation. So if you see things on, oh yeah, this guy beat this guy from this style, what Sifu Nate said is true. It's not so much about the style as about that individual and how they train. For example, I knew a person who was a really, really high level Tai Chi instructor, but he trained all the applications with hard contact, so he could actually functionalize his Tai Chi for combat. As where most people, that when you think of Tai Chi, you think of something that is just a cool exercise people do in the park, and it might be good for your health, but they don't see the fighting aspect. But the real thing, oh yeah, there's some deep stuff in there. And a lot of deep structural physiology, kinesiology, medical knowledge there as well. That you can use and exploit that for combat, or you can utilize that for your health. But that's there. I also had a friend of mine who was one of my teachers, particularly in Taekwondo, and you think of Taekwondo as a sport with all kicks, but this particular person was a retired combat veteran who had a lot of real life street experience, and his Taekwondo does not look like the typical Taekwondo that most people think of, because his experience shaped his art. So his invitation to style was Taekwondo, because when he was stationed in Korea, he studied that. But his application of that invitation was very street lethal and very practical because of who he was. So the name doesn't tell you the story. Even in the world we live in now, there's so many other things where this is true. Don't judge a book by its cover. Make sure, in the old Native American sense, you walk a mile in someone's moccasins before you try to understand their perspective. Don't be too quick to put things in a box, because true martial artists don't exist in a box. They're so far out, through, under, and over the box that they have to think of what is a box to be in the box. The box is the invitation. When you're a little kid or a beginner, you're doing a set structure, right? We talked about this the other day, where a punch is a punch and a kick is a kick, because you don't know anything. But then when you start training, it's a very specific thing. Oh, my teacher told me that you do this to create the fist. Oh, my teacher told me that you do this to create the fist. My teacher told me that you act like you're trying to catch a fly to create a fist. There's many ways, right? But then when you're learning and you're in that middle section of your journey, it's very specific. Oh, I know 14 different kinds of side kicks, or whatever it is. But in the end, when it's real life and you have to defend your family, then a punch is a punch and a kick is a kick. You don't think of the move. And that's true in every martial art, whether it's the Filipino martial arts with a weapons-based system, or judo, jiu-jitsu, sambo, submission wrestling, where it's a kinesthetic, grappling-based system. Doesn't matter what the style is. There comes a point where you transcend that. So think of style as an invitation, not as a constraint. Think of style as an invitation for your journey as a human being, as a martial artist, where literally, if you have that perspective, you'll be a white belt your whole entire life and be stoked about that, because that invites you constantly to have that rush, that excitement that you had when you first started, right? The joy of being a white belt. There's no expectations on you. No one expects you to be good at anything, right? You go in there going, I don't know anything, so you have nowhere to go but up. Some people get in a rut. Once they've been in something for a while, they feel stuck and restless and bored. And usually for those people, before I tell them, oh yeah, try this other thing, I have them re-examine where they came from and see if there's a way that they can rediscover their roots in a way that then inspires their journey forward, if that makes any sense to you. So don't get stuck in the style box. To get stuck in the style box is actually to miss the point, particularly of those systems I mentioned that are meant to develop you on a more holistic and inclusive level. And certainly Jeet Kune Do, that's true, right? No way is way, no limitation is limitation. You have to start with really believing the philosophy. And then it's only then when spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, you get that then the physicality of it will truly make sense in a way that you don't have to think about, and thus you can achieve unconscious competence, which is the true goal of your skill set. And if you can really do that, you can do it over and over again. So I'm going to reference a friend of mine that I know is watching today, Dr. Conrad Bowie, because like me, he's trained in a lot of different things. And I was sharing with him the other day that to me it's like music. If when you were a child, you learned the piano, then you're understanding the modes and the chords and how different things work together. It's also requiring a lot of ambidexterity and complex motor skills. And you're understanding music theory. You're understanding how music is written. So you're not operating from rote. Rote is you just copy, right? But to truly create music, you have to understand it. So then there's that. And then if you work on a string instrument, so for me as a little kid, that was ukulele, and you're working on the string instrument, and now you're having to discover a new way to create harmony. And then you go to the next level, which, or next area of study anyway, because it doesn't have to be in this order, which would be a wind instrument, whether, for me that was a saxophone, but it could be a flute or a clarinet or whatever you want, because now you're using your breath to create sound. And that will then have an effect on how you speak, how you communicate, because you're learning how to regulate your breath, which is very valuable in fighting. And then percussion, which is the heartbeat of music. So you learn the drums. Now, if you honestly did this from 6 to 18, right? If you did this journey for that long, then no kidding, you could go to India and play the sitar very well in a short amount of time. You could go anywhere in the world and play their indigenous instrument if you were learning from a good teacher quite quickly, because you understood the underlying bass that applies to all music. And at a certain point, it stops being technical, right? Everyone in piano, all of you who studied piano out there, how many of you had to learn on Für Elise, for example, Beethoven's Für Elise? Yeah, a lot of us. So there comes a point where you don't want to do that. You want to play whatever you like to hear. So you learn classically first to understand your core. So think of classical also as martial arts. I got a lot of value out of Shotokan Karate Do from Ken Funakoshi and his son Kevin Funakoshi. And there was a science to the way that art was taught that meant that every single basic had to be perfected. It wasn't as flashy as a lot of other studies in martial arts that I've done. But the idea of perfecting each tool, that your maigeri, your front kick, has to be perfect, not just how it looks, because that doesn't matter, but in the function of it. And then cultivating each one of those basic tools to a super high level was the hallmark of that particular martial art, which then, if you understand that concept, you can apply that to every martial art. You can apply it, right? Just like the feeling of the Kajikembo, that toughness. You could take anything and toughen it up using that the old saying in Kajikembo was, it doesn't get real until there's blood on the mat, and the idea of the black gi is not showing all the blood, right? Old school. But that toughness meant that if you came from Kajikembo, then whatever cool martial art thing you showed me, it better work, because I'm gonna pressure test that, whether it's through full contact kickboxing or submission grappling or MMA. That idea of those is very comfortable to Kajikembo people because they come from that visceral street toughness. By the same token, the other side, the healing side, the moral side, Kodokan Danzanryu Jiu-Jitsu is very good at that, at helping you see the value in every other culture and every other person. And the feeling that I felt in that course of study led me to honestly see every human being I ever met as a teacher. Meaning, every person you ever meet in life has something that they can teach you, and you have something to offer them. You just have to discover what that is through relationship. One time when I was a kid, I was at a bus stop, and I was next to a man that had sticks sticking out of his backpack, and he was hungry. And I had just gone and gotten myself some lunch. I could tell he was hungry by the way he was looking at me, so I cut my sandwich in half and I offered him half of it. And part of that is I grew up as a Boy Scout, so I wasn't carrying a knife for some weapon reason or Filipino martial arts reason. I grew up carrying a blade because my grandfather gave me a buck knife and I always had it on me as a tool, as man's first tool. He was part Native American, and one summer we made our own obsidian knives, and the idea of it was as a tool, not as a weapon, as a functional tool for everyday carry, which is a thing, right? EDC, everyday carry. In the promotions for this video, I mentioned the straw as a potential EDC because it's something you'd have on you anyway. So anyway, I shared my lunch with this man, and then he made comments on the knife, and I started talking about that, and he said, well, if you're interested in that, maybe you should study Eskrima, which he did. And he went further, and then he took out his two sticks, and while we were waiting for the bus, he taught me the 5 basic strikes, right, cincotas, and then he showed me defenses against them, and then I ended up getting his phone number and regularly meeting with him and treasuring that relationship. And he was like a homeless dude that just happened to be at the bus stop I was at. But rather than think, oh, this guy hasn't taken a shower and he's scary, I'm gonna stay over here, I came from an opportunity to learn something from someone that we were both at the bus stop. And I was just a kid. But the idea is that created a relationship, which then inspired me and helped me see the value and the magic in the Filipino martial arts. So you never know, right? You just never know. But if you're open to that and you're coming from Aloha, you're coming from that place, those kinds of opportunities will happen more often to you in life. And that's a thing, right? If you look at a list of human beings' greatest fears, you'd be very surprised at what most people say is number 1. Number 2 is predictable, right? Fear of death. So you're a kid, you're at the edge of a cliff, whoa, that'd be scary. Number 3, very relevant right now, fear of catching a disease. Very relevant right now, making a lot of decisions for people around us. But number 1 is surprising. Number 1 is fear of public speaking. Now, objectively, the average person might think, oh, that's when you're in school and you have to do show and tell or talk in front of your classmates and you're nervous and da-da-da-da. But really, I see that a different way. It doesn't seem like it now, but as a kid, I was crazy shy. I was open-hearted, but I was crazy shy. So my father saw that and gave me a book by Dale Carnegie on like helping you with communicating with other people and making friends and this and that. But part of it for me was finding your voice for what matters to you. Not what you think other people want you to say, or not what you think other people want you to be, but finding your own voice and then expressing that voice. Expressing that voice in a way that's an invitation to develop positive relationships with other people and to grow yourself as a human being through the reflection of the positive things that come from others. The different mentors, coaches, family members that believe in you, that have faith in you, that love you. And sometimes the most meaningful ones are the ones that don't have a reason. They express a helping hand, they care about you, and you don't know why. They see something in you you don't see in yourself, and they take the extra effort to go the extra mile to help you, right? And that type of thing is something that then you have to pay forward. You have to carry that torch and do that for other people. To me, that's really what the martial arts thing is all about. People come to the invitation for different reasons. They want to get in shape, they want to have more personal self-confidence, they want to be able to defend themselves, they want to be able to compete as a sport, or they want to be able to express themselves artistically, like a high-level dancer or a gymnast, as a martial artist, which of course Sifu Nate is quite good at that aspect. But there are all these different facets, and when you put out the invitation, each individual that comes to you has a different reason. They have a different facet that's most important to them. But on their journey, a different facet might emerge once that one starts to become satisfied. So that's an amazing process to witness, and something that's very valuable as a teacher to see someone grow in that way, to the point where then your goal, at least my goal, is that each one of these guys, I want them to actually surpass me. So when I was a kid, I would see other guys that they would say when no one else is around to the other black belts, yeah, you know, but I know you think my student's pretty good, but I can still beat him up because I never showed him my 5 coolest moves. Well, if every high-level teacher never shows their students their best stuff, that knowledge dies with them. It's gone. And so part of the process of the science side, of the martial arts research side, is the collecting and preservation of these valuable physical skills and philosophical insights from these great teachers that surround us. And one might be right in front of you at a bus stop. That's what I'm trying to share with you. You just don't know. You might not know us at all and happen today on this channel by accident. I don't know. I'm literally talking to a wall right now, but I'm putting it out there that I'm okay with that because this is an invitation. And this invitation might lead you to somewhere cool. And you just never know. You never know how that's going to transpire. So really, if I'm teaching him ground grappling, I'm hoping that he gets to a point in skill where he then becomes difficult for me to grapple, because then that means I did a good job coaching him, right? So certainly in some of the material that those of you who watch his channel are fans of him for, right? He's particularly good at that particular element. And at this point, in terms of parkour, free running, tricking, all of that kind of stuff, yeah, he's better than me, but I'm cool with that because I don't have an ego that says I have to be better than my students at everything. Even though way back in the day, and there are pictures to prove it, I could do backflips and jump split kicks and all this kind of stuff. You know, life is life. You get injuries, you get older, and sometimes you can't always do that. But at least I got to a point where I understood it enough that I could pass what I did have on to him, and then he launched off of that and went boom. You know, it's like I taught someone how to fly a Cessna and now they're flying the space shuttle. It's pretty cool. So if you can be someone that inspires someone else to do something you've always dreamed of doing, then you've actually achieved that dream through them in a way, right? And then there's always a new facet. There will come a point when he wants to evolve and look at another aspect, right? And then I'll have something new to teach him because now he's suddenly interested in that. As long as you as a teacher are constantly sharpening the sword and reinventing the wheel and developing yourself, you don't get to a point where you're stagnant. And that's the thing. your ability to stay relevant and stay growing and stay functional and stay in a pathway that leads you somewhere new is going to then be ripples in a pond to everyone you work with. And check this out. I never even did this YouTube stuff before, but now through him, I'm sharing with you. So you just never know how it's all gonna work together. And to me, in this time of COVID-19, where we don't have so much in-person training, this is kind of a cool way to feel that ohana, that connectedness to other people. So, thoughts on that, guy who's been typing on the computer?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of things have been going on both in the chat and as Professor Kai has been talking, and he's been sharing a lot of good knowledge with you guys. I've been trying to keep up with your guys' comments because you're kind of going off in a discussion, and we've been talking about maybe we should make this into like another kind of chat thing where it's a live chat only. I don't know, but yeah, usually we don't get that many comments in the chat.
Thank you, though. It shows interest.
It shows interest. I'm glad. I'm really happy about it. You guys are really starting to think now, and that's really what it's about. Just becoming curious and having questions to be there's answers. It's, in a way, that's fighting too. When there's an attack, that's a problem or a question, and you have to find an answer to that question, right? So same thing with all this. So like, it's good. I really like it. I know we're running out of time though, and we did get through a lot of questions as we tried to, and a lot of the important ones I'm hoping. And I know each time we talk about something, it leads to more things because I've been seeing the chat going off on saying things, commenting about what we're talking about currently, and adding on to that question and adding on. And we could go endlessly, and we wish we could spend as much time as we could to do that. And we would spend all day if we could, but unfortunately I have to be going soon, and I think Professor Kai also has to go. But I'm thanking you all again for being so engaging. But we will have this again next week. Maybe we'll have to add another chat or another live video day. If we can find a time to do that, I'll let you know. I'll put it up in the community tab. And thanks again for Tony, who gave us a super chat today.
And Tony, I hope you realize that almost the entire hour was dedicated to answering your question, because we are very grateful to you. I do want to spend at least 90 seconds though on the tagline for the video, because that's what we told everyone we were going to do today.
Oh,
and,
right.
and integrity-wise, for me, I need to keep my word. So I want to give you a crawl, walk, run on these guys.
Okay.
So here's the crawl. The crawl is with this specifically, whether it's a straw or a Kubotan or a pen or any kind of cylindrical object you could hold in your hand. My crawl for you is to practice that. Meaning, if you have a basic tool, which could be any form of punch, whether it's vertical or regular, practice it with the implement in your hand, and then practice actually hitting the heavy bag or something with that in your hand. And then next level to that is being able to use the ends. So on a simple level, I'm not going to show this with the stainless steel straw because I don't want to injure Nate. I'm going to show this with the Kubotan because it's a lot safer to do it that way. So actually I'll use the stick that my friend in Cebu made for me. So I don't just have the ability to hit with this, right? We also have the end. And in terms of tensile strength, a hard object is over 60 times stronger in pounds per square inch than a finger or a knuckle. So instead of just hitting now, I have the ends, right? Hammer fist. So any normal target, whether it's a solar plexus, I now have the fist pack concept, but I also have the ends, whichever way I deliver it. So crawl, practice with an object in your hand, doing what you already know how to do, right? Could be jab, cross, hook, and now the end of my hook has a tip, right? So I could also do jab, cross, hook. This is actually the way I normally hook because it's safer for the wrist and it puts the pressure more directly on the knuckles. It's less injurious. Your pinky knuckle's not as strong. It makes sense with boxing gloves, but not so much without. So Sifu Richard Bastillo taught me to hook this way, and I've done it my whole life ever since meeting him because testing it on a heavy bag, it just worked better. But also if I hit this way, then it's easier for me to hit up or down. So that would be level 2. Level 1, practice your basics with the implement, whether it's the straw or a pen or whatever. Could be a Sharpie, I don't care. Level 2 is now work on something less violent, which you can do with these implements. So, I'll give you an example. The subclavian arteries right here, so right at the end of the clavicle, I can make him real short real quick, right? So, any type of defense situation gets amplified if you know where to touch with one of these things. I could do a whole course with just this. But on a basic level, any type of thing. So let's say he was using his right hand to choke me, boom, right? So all I'm doing is the little soft spot in the elbow, boom, right? Then even on a wrist lock, boom. I can make him go down, I can make him go back up, I can pull the elbow this way, I can come over and use this implement to keep my lock going, I can go under the armpit, that's a good pressure point, right? Any type of point that would be vulnerable for leverage gets amplified with a tool. Let's say I'm working my jiu-jitsu, okay? So now it's not just this, I have the tool, I can create the opening that makes this here, and then look, see how I use the implement to lock the choke? So all kinds of ways to enhance what you already know just by adding the tool. And that would be your walking stage. So basics is your crawl stage. Using specific targeting would be your walk stage because you're working your accuracy with your technique. And then that's also honestly less violent. So I don't have to hit him if I can eliminate the threat by applying this to a vulnerable area of the body. So that would be my walk stage. Now your run stage, believe it or not, has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the mental visualization and awareness that you can find in the world around you. What I mean by that is exactly what happened to us yesterday, where I saw these stainless steel straws for sale and went, boom, that would be a great weapon of opportunity or everyday carry defensive tool. So in other words, you're at a restaurant and they have salt and pepper on the table, and there's somebody that you think is going to cause you trouble, and all I got to do is unscrew those shakers, and in a moment of threat, boom, I can splash the salt and pepper, create a distraction, use that to escape, or I could use the salt and pepper shakers in the same way that we could use these implements. But the idea is, everywhere I go, I'm looking for, if something bad happened right now, and I don't have stainless steel straws in my pocket, what can I use to create a window to ironically be less violent? And I mean that because if I splash you with salt and pepper, I'm out the door before the fight happens, so I actually don't have to hurt you as much. And really, the least violence I can use to solve the problem is what I want to do. So the higher skilled arts in a high level way allow you to be a more peaceful person, because the more skill you have, the least amount of actual injury you have to cause to control and de-escalate the threat. So when you're just starting out, you might think, oh, I need to injure them really bad so I can get away. And then in the middle, right, you're actually agreeing to like a duel where you have an ongoing fight that you want to prevail in. But on the high end, I want to be able to not have anyone get hurt if at all possible. So that's another thing. If you have this awareness that says the salt and pepper on the table is my friend in an emergency, then you get calmer. Your heart rate gets lower. You're less likely to feel angry and afraid. And now when that guy walks by again, you can say, hey, how's it? Hope you're having a good day. Because you're not afraid or angry. If you can do that, then your whole life in the future becomes a better experience. So those are some parting thoughts for me.
Yes, that's great. Thank you. So yeah, we did get to the point of the whole video, which was the straws, which we got for you, and we did use them and talk about that a little bit. And there was a lot of great questions today, and we never expected that, so that's something that was a surprise, and I hope that you guys enjoyed all of that. And now we're gonna have to figure out another thing for next week. Maybe we're gonna have to add 2, like I said. So we'll keep in touch about that. Check the community tab. For you members, make sure you also check the community tab as well, because your special videos will be on there as well. So Yeah, also someone asked about the shirts. Yeah, they are about $19 or $20 about for this one, and I think the other student's shirt is like $25.99 or something.
And we're
So-
making some new ones actually.
Yeah.
We're making some dry fits that we're working on right now for next month. So in conjunction with this other website we're setting up. So there will be some other cool ways to interface with our community together as we go forth on our journey together as martial artists and as human beings.
Thank you guys again. I'll see you guys later. Aloha.
And please subscribe to me too.
All right,
I
subscribe to
have-
Aloha Kai.
I have 826 people. I need a little bit more. So Aloha Kai, OLOHEKAI. That's my channel. I probably should change it to something super simple. But in Hawaiian, that makes sense, and I thought it was cool. But and it was out of respect to my teachers and our culture. But please do also subscribe there, and we will have some new and exciting stuff for you coming up next week.
All right, sounds good. And yes, we do have those hoodies so that you can check that out too. All right.